this is a really contentious topic every time it comes up. From your perspective, what different models might work if the licence fee isn't fit for purpose?
Well, good morning, both, and thank you for having me on. I'd first like to start by congratulating talkTV for what I think is a really, really important investigation, highlighting the very serious concerns. What we would like to see at the Taxpayers Alliance is a complete reform of the system that jettisons the licence fee altogether. So, in an essence, what we'd like to see is a really slimmed down BBC, perhaps one TV channel, one radio channel, which retains those core BBC services that we all know and in many cases love, and fund that through central taxation. So a much more slimmed down BBC, which retains those really core functions that we all like and funded through general taxation. That's what we would look for as a way to remedy this.
Joe, welcome to Talk Today. Really appreciate your words. The thing about the BBC, and people say, oh, you know, that your station or people are bashing them. I understand the need for a state broadcast. The world's changed, though. It's like the NHS is not fit for purpose. The Home Office is not fit for purpose. Nowadays, with the price increase, where people make choices to watch, it is becoming increasingly unlikely that people will support the fact that you have to pay something whether you watch it or not. Surely the way the world is moving towards digitalisation and online, surely the BBC needs to move with it. You understand other networks and channels saying, hold on a minute, you don't have to justify your existence. If we don't sell adverts, we're not on air. The BBC can just do whatever it can, and of course they will be criticised as a result of that, and quite rightly too.
Well, that's absolutely right, Jeremy. I mean, if you look at Australia removed their licence fee in the 1970s, and here we are in the 2020s, still clinging on to this archaic system. It's absolutely ludicrous. And I mean, if you look at even the government's own reports on this, the licence fee system is becoming unsustainable. Hundreds of thousands of people are dropping off every year from paying the licence fee as, you know, young people move towards streaming services and those sorts of things. So whichever way you cut it, whether you support the BBC or you don't, the licence fee model is quickly running out of steam. And I think we've got the 2027 Charter Review coming up very soon. And I think this is the opportunity to really reform the system and make the BBC more fit for the future.
Joe, I don't think we're getting the voice across of someone who loves the BBC, who maybe has had cuts to their local radio station over the last 12 months or so and is absolutely in despair that they think, when we've got something like cold weather, I want local, reliable news on my doorstep who's going to help me do that. We are at risk of losing that valuable resource if we say all of that money, we're going to pull the plug.
Well, I completely understand what you're saying there, but you know what I would say is local radio is actually one of the big concerns with the BBC, because what we find is that it manages to outcompete little startup radio stations which can provide those core services. You see that across the board. Local radio stations really struggle to compete with the BBC that can rely on the licence fee. So I wouldn't say that there's a massive risk of sort of pulling that plug there and removing those local services. I think we can, you know, rely on local broadcasters, people there on the ground with the will to start little radio stations to fill those gaps.
Listen, Joe, thank you, mate. Whatever anybody thinks about it, prosecuting old people, making people pay for something they don't use, the BBC needs to take a long look in the mirror, I think, because the world's changed. Joe, thank you so much indeed.